So, welcome everybody to Seeds of Regeneration, a series devoted to the recovery of optimal health and fertility on all levels: the earth, the soil, the body and mind, our relationships. And it's a series I started in Spanish, and today I'm really happy to have a first edition in English with Lindsey Curtis. I'm going to tell you in a second more about Lindsey. And we're actually going to take the topic beyond food production and how to regenerate our soils to a topic that is really, I feel, so crucial, which is consent. And yeah, welcome, Lindsey. Lindsey has been a friend for many, many years, and she is devoted to helping women come home to themselves. And she basically uses the tools of imagery and feminine embodiment to help women connect with their soulful vitality. And yeah, welcome, Lindsey.
Thank you, Claudia. Thanks for having me here. I'm excited to talk with you today.
Yes. So let's start that you just give me your perception of what is regeneration and what does it mean for you, maybe also on your personal path before we
Mm,
dive into the topic of consent.
mm. Yeah, what is regeneration? Great question. I would say regeneration is our natural movement in life. We are actually constantly regenerating ourselves, regenerating our creations, regenerating our environments in our most natural and healthy state. When we're no longer regenerating, what are we doing? We're degenerating, right? And so it's like, are we choosing life and creation, or are we dying? Very in the most basic terms, that's what I would look at as like regeneration.
Mhm.
Um, am I creating with the source of vitality and the source of life itself? Hmm.
Great. And we chose as a topic today consent, which I know is a topic that is very close to your heart, and a lot of your work is inspired by it.
Yeah.
And I would like to know first, how would you define consent, and how does it tie into that idea of regenerating ourselves and living a creative life?
Hmm. Well, it's funny. The first thing that comes up for me is actually when I was studying psychology, I was also doing a lot of metaphysics classes. And in one of my metaphysics class, we really had to research and present an argument for, is free will real? And does free will coexist with destiny? And it was at that moment where I was really in my mind and then spending a lot of time in nature and then being in my mind and then spending a lot of time in nature, that I was like, the two really coexist. And free will is our consent. It is our saying yes, and it's also our saying no, non-giving consent to life itself, which maybe is destiny. I do believe that we all have a deep purpose and a pathway here that is of our highest alignment and most creative self-expression of love and of God itself embodied through ourselves. But it's a choice to live that, and it's a choice to create that. And a lot of the reasons why maybe we don't choose that, it's so complex, right? We're such intricate beings, these beautiful humans that we are. There's so many layers of personal experience, collective experience, our educational and our familial programming, and then, of course, our ancestral heritage and what's been going on, all in relation to what am I saying yes to and what am I saying no to? And often we've given away our full consent to things that aren't serving life, that are very degenerative, but we think that it's the proper way. Or consent on this planet has been very twisted for, a long time, eons, I'll say, at least a couple thousand years, where consent, we're still giving our consent. We're still saying yes to things that should be, not should, when we are in a complete state of stillness, if and when we are in that stillness, we would likely say no to a number of things. Yet some part of us that is not in that stillness is saying yes, and is choosing yes and consenting to certain experiences. And so for me, my work in the world and what I love to bring is like, what are we consenting to? And let's get really deep into that. Let's look super closely and examine that, because everything actually that we're experiencing in our life, we're saying yes on some level. And that level might be so minute in the subconscious field, but it's still there and it exists. And it's intertwined with the collective consent, and it's intertwined with all these things. So yes, it's super vast, and it's also super easy and simple, because when we get to point at exactly the pin of the needle, we get to choose again. And that's where we get to reclaim our consent and really our lives and our soulful vitality.
What I hear is, on the one hand, consent, meaning that I am saying yes to something, and also that I can do that in a conscious way or in an unconscious way, in a way just tolerating maybe some circumstances and not objecting them. So how can we indeed bring more consciousness into, let's say, all the choices that we are making? Because in the end, yes, it's either yes or no. And of course, there's also something in between. I mean, it can be a big yes, or it can be just, okay, it's not a big no, so I can kind of go along with it. But I think most of us don't actually arrive to that level of, doing that consciously. It's kind of just happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what are the implications of that? How do you think it's affecting our relationships, our health, our experience of life?
Well, I would just ask everybody that is listening to reflect on that. Like, what are the things that are going on in your life that you don't necessarily fully agree with, you don't enjoy, you don't love, and yet they're happening? And so, on some level, you're saying yes. Like, we're saying yes to dysfunction often, because, and it does take a certain muscle, it does take a certain tenacity and courage to say, actually, no, this doesn't feel right for me. Let's renegotiate. Let's rearrange this configuration,
For
right?
that, for that to happen, we would actually have to be connected with how does yes and no feel in our body, right?
That, and I mean, first of all, just taking a constating, like, what is the state of my reality? Like, I would really say, like, that's step number one, just like becoming aware of what is here. How does it even feel? And then, of course, how do we know what it feels like that's happening in the body? And so starting to orient throughout the day to, how do I feel about this? How am I experiencing this in my body? Really building that bodily awareness and connection. And then, yes, definitely being able to go in and being like, what is my body's yes? What is my body's no? Am I respecting that? Am I actually listening to that? Am I taking that pause and listening? Oh, body says yes to this thing that I feel a bit scared of, but it's clear that it's going to bring me a lot of vitality if I do it. And it's going to stretch my creativity, and it's going to enlighten this relationship in some sort of way. So, can I follow it? I do believe our bodies are the greatest guide that we have as humans on the earth, to really experience divine guidance through our forms.
And before you were talking about destiny also. And in your perspective, would you say that what we are experiencing, we consented to it beforehand on some other level, like before even incarnating? Or like, how do you see that?
Yeah, such a deep question. And like, yes, we totally know what we sign up for. And we don't always necessarily know the details of that. And I speak really entirely in truth of my own personal experience and from working with clients for over a decade, of being able to trace and bring back to the soul level choice of prior to conception, of prior to incarnation. Like, we choose our parents. Even that choice already determines so much of our life experience and the possibilities that we're going to have. Like, we're choosing our parents coming into this realm. So we're choosing the economic standing that we're going to be in. We're choosing the emotional intelligence environment. We're choosing the representative trauma experiences that are already there living in these two individuals. Like, we're choosing a lot of our foundation. So even if we just said that's the only choice we made, that's setting us up for a certain life trajectory. And why do we choose that? Because we know, and because we are on this soulful journey of expansion and expression. And we wouldn't choose anything that we would have any doubt that we would be able to overcome. And that's what's really amazing, to come back to the fact that, like, we really chose this because we knew we could do something with it, because we knew and hopefully know, and we can connect back to that knowing, that we are incredibly powerful. We have the capacity to transform the most miraculous situations when we are connected to that source of power within us. And so none of our circumstances that might be inhibiting are actually so, but they're the creative soil that we came in to work with and turn into compost and turn into rich humus and, like, really go somewhere with.
Yeah, it's kind of that paradox where I feel moving through life, we can experience something, maybe even on the physical level, right, as a no, or as something that we would not actually want to see in this world. And at the same time, on another level, knowing that we consented to this and we chose this and say a yes to it. So I think that's the paradox in a way of being human, and it can be a big source of relief or of pain, depending on how capable we are to own, I feel, our consent, right? Our choice of this experience. Because if I'm in resistance constantly to my life experience and I feel it's something external and has nothing to do with me and it's just kind of happening to me, then it might create a lot of suffering and pain, right? Whereas if I can see that on some level, even if I cannot grasp it or understand it fully, that I chose that and said yes to it on some level, somehow it becomes more bearable and maybe even fun. Yeah, that's at least
Well, you're really touching in on recognizing that we have a choice. And when we can recognize and accept our present circumstances for what they are, without needing to change them, but we can really be like, okay, this is fully happening. I can really look at the whole thing. Suddenly, in that moment, now I can choose anew. But when I'm resisting something, I don't have the power of my creativity to really choose to create something different. I'm not being with what is. And with what is actually where my energy source is coming from.
So let's maybe talk a bit about the power that is there in consent. And you were just already kind of opening up on it. Like, it opens a door, right? Also, when I am now thinking of something more material, like a relationship, let's say, if I am in a place of consent, I can build on that, right? I can create within that container, let's say, of that I consented to. Whereas if I maybe have not clarified the limits and what is going to happen, maybe I'm just going to be so scared that I'm just going to close down completely and not create at all anything, because I haven't been clear about what I'm consenting to. Can you maybe share a bit about that from your experience, how, like, consent in relationships? Because I know also you work a lot with sexuality, and I guess it's a very, very important pillar when it comes to that realm.
Okay, so when you say relationships, you're really talking about like a couple kind of dynamic,
It
or
could be any relationship, right? But I guess it's most it's kind of most in our faces when it comes to sex and intimate relating. Yeah.
So for me, and this is why I like to just define, because for me, intimate relating happens on all the levels in all the relations. And
Yeah.
I have a very specific way of interacting with the word intimacy. So it's always good that we get on like super right, the same page. And so if we're talking about like a sexual dynamic interaction, a sexual relation, it's consent is interesting. So I'll bring it back, and I have a workshop that I love to give on consent, and in this workshop I talk about the 3 different kinds of consent. We have full consent, like my full consciousness is saying yes, and I'm totally here for it. Then I have conceded, not conceded, ceded consent, and that is where I'm like not like an entire no, and I feel the other's desire, and I'm like, okay, I can go along with this. I'm still saying yes. And then we have coerced consent, where like if it's a sexual experience and we're like no, and then the partner of that moment is like, oh, but if you don't do this, then I'm not going to do that. And so suddenly there's a coercion, there's a manipulation, and I can say yes to that. I can give my consent to going ahead, but now it's not that clear, right? And so we can look at this as well. Like we do have kind of 3 different timelines that we're always working with in this light. We have like our most creative timeline. We have a kind of basic level, okay, we're existing, and then we have like survival mode. And that coerced consent really puts us in a state of survival because it's not our full self that's fully vibrant in here. So in sexual relations, there's those 3 that are happening kind of all the time. Perhaps for some people, some it's only like 2 out of the 3. And of course, we're always dancing with them, right? Because people pleasing, certainly for women, I work majority with women, people pleasing and kind of ceding consent is the way that a lot of women actually entered into sexual relationship. They didn't have a lot of the women I work with didn't really have an experience of themselves as sexual being before they were in relating. So that is like their foundation at that level. And luckily we can always rebuild our foundation. We can always add layers and go deeper. So none of this is static. Nothing that we're talking about today is static and written in stone. That's the real beauty of ourselves as dreamers of this great dream. We can alter it and upgrade it whenever we really desire and say yes to the work that involves. But that's a tangent. But coming back to, in relationship, it's coming back to the body, and it's being willing to say yes and say no to things. And when our body, if we're really going into sexual relation here, when our body feels safe, the pathways of orgasmicness, the pathways of ecstasy and bliss that open are infinite. And we're not going to be able to really access those if we're not creating safe spaces within ourselves and within our partnerships. And I'll give just a personal example. Like a few years ago, I was with my partner and my beloved, and we were like wanting to have a sexual relationship, not really interaction, but I really completely wasn't available for it. It's just not where I was. And I also wanted to be in connection. So I felt like this inner, oh, I want it, but I don't want it. And I want to respect myself, but I don't know what to do here. And so I like exhaled super deeply, and I'm like, I want to be with you. And what I'm available for is for me to lay down with all my clothes on and you can tickle me. And I felt so weird. And I was like, oh my God. Like, I mean, we've been together for a decade. So we have this level of growth together and intimacy. But it was such an edge for me to say that in that moment. It was such a let go of putting him, like having focus on him, like what is my real availability and can I say that? And so I say it, and huge full body orgasmic experience for both of us that was like so intimate and so magical. And it's like, we had all our clothes on. And but that level of safety and that level of pure expression of what is, because that's what it is, that's what was, and opening that what is just brings us to other levels of experience.
Sure, it can change instantly into something different, but you cannot jump there before saying yes to what is right now. Yeah,
Exactly.
so beautiful. I feel this is so subtle also, the trust can be destroyed so quickly. Like also I remember from having been intimate with people, and then not even with bad intention, but they kind of do something which, wow, for me came kind of like as a shock, like too quick or too much, or I don't know, and immediately the body closes down, and then you're like, oh, that wasn't really important, it's like, and jump over it. But actually, like back then, this now would be a different way I would handle it. But I remember, like even now, these situations are stuck in my mind because they were so impactful, right? And I feel we often kind of discard them because we are intimate, and as if that gives them already permission to do everything with us, just because we are kind of in a relationship. And just this really bodily experience of, hey, not just mentally knowing I can say no and I can really be true and authentic, but experience that and see also how the partner responds. That really creates such a level of trust that then, as you say, can open up a completely different level of intimacy and experience.
Yeah, there's things there, like in one of my courses that I give, Embody Pussy, like we really focus on a woman's real embodiment of pussy and being able to come into contact with the wisdom that is closure, the wisdom that is that tightening, and can I really be with it? Because this is the thing, when I was receiving your recount of that experience, like I could feel all the energies up here. And where should we be when we're having sex? Like, where should we, like, even if it's, just energetic, like, let's be in our sexual center. And so much of us, and of course, us being like different moments on our timelines, and us as the human collective, we're not anchored actually in our sex. And so if we're going to talk about relationship and consent, like how do we really go there if we're not anchored in it first? Because we need to be able to feel and honor that feeling without any sort of intellectualization of that feeling.
Yeah.
And that is like a great aspect of our society. Like, the example that comes is like, it's a baby that doesn't want to be separated from their mom, and because it doesn't understand object permanence yet. It's only a few weeks old. Like there's no explaining to that baby that it's okay because your mom is going to be back. It's totally natural that she's gone away from you right now. No, like we can't intellectualize that experience, but we try. Lots of people try. And it just creates such a disconnect from our actual body and that wisdom of like, no, I have this need. I have this need to be respected in this way. I have this need to be listened to. I have this need to be connected to in this kind of touch. And when we can come back to that, oof, we're doing great work.
Yeah, it's about trusting also, right? What we perceive and what we feel that we need and desire, and beyond conditioning and what we've been told, and that's a whole journey. But yes, I mean, if we don't, in the end, we're saying yes to self-abuse in subtle or not so subtle ways.
And if you're naming that, like this is something we often touch in my work, it's like more often than not, the self-abuse numero uno is the woman against her own sexuality. And the way she just like goes at that clitoris and has no like real embodied connection with everything else that's going on in the body, and all that tension building and all that's not actual like pleasure. That's actually, if we go in and we listen to like what is the clitoris have to say, it's slow down for a moment. And it's, it's, yeah, we can take it on that really micro step of like, how is our relationship with really respecting our own consent, not in relationship and all these things, but like in our actual own relationship with ourselves.
Yes.
How do we respect, ooh, I love to be touched that way. And that's like, I love to be squeezed. Do I give myself that squeeze from time to time? I learned years ago that like through brain scans, they've been able to study that the body, the nervous system doesn't make a difference whether it's your touch or another's touch. Like on that basic level, there's no difference. And so it's like, if I'm needing connection, do I also give that to myself? Am I also like willing to listen to what is the kind of touch, what is the kind of approach that is going to be best nourishing to me in this moment? And it's not just like a goal focused, let me get off kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it really touches on all levels of experience, right? From starting with ourselves. I'm thinking right now also on food and eating. Do I respect the consent of my stomach to receive more food, or is it already full and I'm just gonna continue stuffing it because, my mind kind of enjoys it? From something like that, like to relating with other people, to relating to the earth, to relating to nature, countries, and like how fundamental this topic of consent really is when it comes to, the quality of all our relationships, and whether we are living in abuse and war and conflict, or with respect and love in the end. I'm interested because I know you work a lot with preconception and imagery and talking also to the soul before it incarnates. And how do you integrate there the topic of consent, if you do?
It's so fantastic, because I mean, literally consent is behind and within and weaved through everything that we live. And you just so beautifully named like that. How often can we relate to like having that extra cookie that I ate yesterday when my body was so yeah, like it's on all the levels. And what I love about the work with soul to soul communication, like I'm a mom, and sometimes I have to make decisions for my son that I'm like, I don't know if this is really right. Like it feels like it, but is it me? Is it my partner's thing, or is this really for him? So I go directly to soul communication, and I'm like, hey, is this really your school? Like, is this activity really good for you? An example I have is that this summer, actually, I decided that I was no longer going to respond to him. And when he spoke to me in French, and every time he spoke French, I said, I don't understand. I need you to speak English. And it was so challenging because naturally he had a lot of frustration. He's 3, so there's big emotion. And after a week, I was like, oh my God, I'm failing. Like, this is driving me nuts. I can't go on. And so I was like, okay, soul to soul communication. I dropped into that space and I was like, are you saying yes to this? Am I trying to push this on you? Because it's really uncomfortable and I'm not sure. And he's 100% yes. I want to speak English with you. It's hard. And I'm like, okay. And that gave me such the relaxation, the trust, the coming back to like, okay, I'm the mama. I need to do this thing for him. I need to create the frame, and he can keep expressing it's fine. But now I know like he's saying yes. And with our, like, that's just in parenting, it's such a useful tool. And in preconception and really coming into this, oh, it's such a treasure. And I'm thinking of like how it helps on so many levels. Like I'm thinking of a woman who became pregnant and she didn't want to become pregnant. She didn't say yes to becoming pregnant. And actually, in coming into the space of soul to soul connection, she did say yes to become pregnant. The soul did come to her for their experience. and this has happened with a number of clients. Like some souls came just for that moment, and they let that soul go in a very conscious, pretty amazing way. And others, it was such a clear yes, and the woman needed to be able to meet the parts of her that were in resistance to that life, while also meeting the parts of her that were saying yes. And so it's both. It's like we don't ever want to just focus on cleaning up all the dirt, but what are we building with, and what are we really connecting to?
And
so
I guess also, if the reality is just that you are pregnant, there are parts in you that are saying yes, maybe even unconsciously. Yeah, I mean,
definitely. And the ones that haven't become pregnant yet, that's so want to become pregnant, and like first connecting to the soul of the child is so potent and powerful, because sometimes right away the soul is like, yeah, I'm not ready yet, like I'm not coming for a while. And sometimes connecting with the body is like, I need a moment, or this relationship isn't for me, or we need a radical change over here. And so it's really coming into the inner experience of what else is going on, what else can I perceive, because on some level this is perfect in this moment, even as uncomfortable as it is, because it's inviting me to grow in some way, it's inviting me to expand, it's inviting me to come into deeper relationship with life.
So I also hear a lot about this tuning into the deeper levels of our being, really on the soul level, rather than maybe what I might perceive, not on a superficial level, as this is what I want and this is what I don't want, to like differentiate.
Yeah.
Which is not easy when we start, and at the same time it's simple, but it's not easy.
All right. So I talk a lot about desire, and how desire is actually like, even in what you had said before, you're like wanting, and like as soon as you say the word, it's like wanting, and this like forward coming close. But as I say desire, it's like dropping into eros, and it's dropping into like this pulse of creation that really, is coming through the earth, through our womb, through this belly center, men as well. And it's not actually so concerned about the result, the thing, the exterior materialization, but it's about the experience. It's about the feeling. It's about the tasting. It's about the expansion or contraction of that. And so it's definitely when we connect deeply to soulful desire, and it's like the things that we've really come in as a soul to experience on this planet, it's about experience, and it is about creation, and it is about creating connection, but it's also about creating experience.
And it can be so vulnerable, right, to ask for what we desire if it implies other people, and asking for their consent also in that regard, if they are willing to contribute in whatever way that we would want them to. So it's saying yes and saying no, both of them.
And that vulnerability, like that is where our power is. Like our vulnerability, it's so vulnerable to actually make a request. It's so vulnerable to actually receive. And we're putting ourselves in that position of receptivity when we make a request, which is different than when we make a demand, when we're saying like imperatively, like do this. It's such a different energy, right? We're directing it, and there's no vulnerability in that. But when I make a request, like I'm open and my arms are here, and I don't know if it's going to come. I don't know if the other is going to meet me here. And can I be willing to stay open in that? Like, can I stay with my heart and womb open to whatever that response is going to be?
Because obviously they are also free to say no.
Yeah. And it's powerful when my beloved is able to say no to me. And I'm like, okay, like, can I be with that? Can I be with whatever things come up in me? Is there a story around my worthiness? Is there a question about the relationship? Is there an insecurity that's suddenly crumbling? Like, that's an opportunity of growth too. And that's an opportunity of tuning back into, like, how strong is my spine here? Can I
Isn't it
hold?
also on a deeper level what creates true trust in the relationship? Like if your partner was never saying no, I guess, I mean, at least for me, like I wouldn't actually want that. And so the no also,
Definitely.
even though it might hurt on the surface, on the deeper level, it's what I actually want in some circumstances, so that then the yes that I get when I get it, also I know I can trust it. So I cannot
Yes.
trust the no, I cannot trust the yes either.
And this is what's so important if we're talking about relating, because women, like, are you listening to that? Just as we want that from our partners, they need that from us. Because if he doesn't know that we can say no, like, we're we're not going to be able to really explore and express, and he's not going to be confident to bring us to certain places because he's not going to be able to trust that we've got ourselves. We can say no when it's too much. He's going to be hyper vigilant and, like, not actually in the experience as much.
Yeah, I remember I study a lot the wheel of consent,
Mm.
and even, after the proposal had been made of the person what they would like to receive, and the person receives it and feels like if it's a yes, if it's a no, then there's still another step, like, do you trust what they say? Kind of a verification step, which I feel is very important, because many of us have been conditioned and may not yet dare to really say no, or maybe are disconnected from our true no. And so I think it's always important to, even if someone says no or yes, to still like feel also, do we actually believe them? Because, maybe it's not true. And then I wouldn't want to act on that.
Mm. Yeah. And again, coming into that bodily awareness, especially womb awareness, like, our instinctual center knows truth. 100%. It knows truth. It can feel dissonance. It can feel when something isn't right. It can feel when the other isn't present. And when that is lacking, like, listen to that.
Yes, that reminds me also of experiences, especially when it comes to touch dynamics. What am I truly consenting to? Because, and that's also tying into the wheel of consent, because there's this difference between someone giving to you touch, for example, as a gift for you, and pretending it's a gift for you when it's actually meant to serve them. Like, in a way, oh, I'm going to give you a massage, when in truth, I want to touch your body. And you
Yeah.
say yes to being given to, but you can feel like it feels weird. It doesn't actually feel like that. And what did I say yes to? And that's not it. And then
Yeah.
the mind starts again, do I say something? Do I stop it? Can I? And I guess many people can identify with that, but it's because we're not feeling safe, as you said before.
And I want to bring in the opposite pole of, like, a time when my partner like, I'm like, you could do that. Like, I don't really want to receive a massage, but you can. Like, I'm willing to do that. And it was totally aligned for me. And there was nothing sexier than feeling him
Yeah,
taking me and feeling him going for what he wanted. And, like, how freeing that was for him as well. Like, when we're able to play in those ways, it's
totally.
really, yeah.
Yes, definitely. And that's why we need to be clear of what we're actually in, what kind of dynamic, right? And then both can be totally fine. Just that often we think we're saying yes to something and it's actually something else, which creates kind of the feeling that it's abusive or something. And then we try to make ourselves like be more receptive, because somehow we cannot enjoy it, and we're kind of, something is wrong with us, when it's actually
Yeah.
just, not what we agreed to.
And it's
Hmm.
actually the wisdom of your body showing you that something isn't true. And, our touch is so, so incredible. And um, Yeah, when we're able to slow it down, like someone went to touch me the other day and I pushed their hand away. And it was such an instinctual motion. Like I was like, no, like actually, and I didn't think about it. There was no thought. There was no, I don't want this person to touch me. Like it was just so instinctual. And then after I reflected on it and I was like, oh yeah, it makes so much sense. Her nervous system was totally fried. And like I didn't want that energy touching my body at that moment. Like how wise my body is.
Yeah.
So we can just like come into that freedom of, okay, how does body want to express with that level of touch? Is it to move away?
Yeah.
Can I let that movement happen without bringing myself up here? Can I just let body be like,
And it's so challenging sometimes in interactions with other people if they are not used to that kind of level of authenticity and they take it personal. When I just moved here to Spain and people like kiss you immediately and hug you and everything. And I was like, with certain people, I was just like, my body was also like doing this, and
I put out my hand.
Yeah, I might do a hi.
Yeah.
But I remember, and like ever since, like every time he sees me, he's like bringing it up, like more in a jokey way. But oh yeah, you don't like to be kissed, and and it's just like maybe I just have a different culture also and a different way of entering into intimate contact with people I don't know. And yeah, just allowing ourselves to question, even what seems to be so normal, because, this is the way we greet each other here.
Yeah.
And I've been talking to many people who actually don't enjoy that way of greeting, but kind of still allow it because, that's just the way it is. And yeah.
Yeah, and it's again, that's cultural, right? It's cultural conditioning that's here, and I can relate to that so strongly. Like as an American, where we shake hands or we hug, like we hug the people we want to have close, or we shake a hand with someone that we want to keep away, and then to be in a place where you have to kiss cheeks, like. And I don't like fake kissing cheeks either. So if I'm going to kiss someone, a lot of times I'm kissing them with my lips, and um yeah, my partner, my husband always laughs at me when he's like, I'm always like intrigued by the people you stick your hand out to. Like I'm like, what are you sensing there? Because it doesn't seem to be like one person or like one type. And I'm like, no, never. It can be the same person but on a different day. It's like, what is the energy coming towards me? Like I need a bit of separation there. And it's so not personal, and it is personal at the same time.
Yeah.
And that can be okay, but of course it's uncomfortable, and we need to be able to develop that assuredness within us. And also, of course, a mother, we need to raise our children and create our boundaries for our children that say it's okay. No, my son doesn't kiss you even though you're his grandparent in this moment. He might later. Like, can we respect that? And so we can start really, really small with the next generations, just because their boundaries are there. Like they know them, their bodies are responding even as newborns. Like they turn away, and there's these subtle communications. So if we can raise our future generations just keeping what is intact, like where the world can be such a different place in a few years, which is really incredible.
I would like to talk about consent in the context of the three stages, which are defined by David Deida. I'm quite a fan of him, and I think you're also familiar, right, with it, where he basically defines the maturation of our relationships, the relationship between masculine and feminine, starting on the inside, into these different phases, starting from basically unconsciousness and victim consciousness and drama triangle dynamics, to then individualization and independence, and what we've been kind of talking about a lot right now, the boundaries and the yes and the no, and respecting each other. And then from there, actually moving into even a further step, which would be kind of devotional, and where consent might actually be consciously disrespected if it serves, let's say, the openness of love, which I know it's a bit of a difficult concept maybe for many people to grasp their head around. But how How do you feel about that when we've kind of built such a strong basis of trust, and we have um, built respect and acted within the container of consent for a long time? Can we then actually at some point leave it behind?
Yeah, so there's a lot of nuance there, and I would say for like, a lot of people it's not yet available because they don't really even know their yes and no's, and
Mm-hmm.
specifically their no's, and they don't have that level of trust and that level of safety in the relation, in the partnership, whatever relation and partnership that might be, not necessarily even sexual, it can be creative, whatever. And 100%, like we can move towards that, but and what it requires is that like ability, well, specifically because Deida talks about male and female relating and masculine and feminine relating, and like can I completely surrender into my feminine and let the masculine lead me in whatever dynamic that might be. And like that is going to be scary. And there are moments where I don't agree with where my man is leading me, actually. And yet, can I trust him? Because maybe he sees something that I don't, which he does. But maybe there's something else that he can bring me to that I could never come to alone. And that is magic. And that is really like, yeah, it comes through the development of trust. And I don't at all like there are, I mean, um, it's not at all funny, but there are a lot of teachers out there now that are teaching like polarity dynamics, and like a woman should always surrender to a man's lead. And it's like, no,
No, I guess there's also yeah.
but my man has plenty of moments where my masculine's a bit more conscious of him at that moment, just like he has many more moments where it's the opposite and we're in this dance. And so it's yeah, really being able to have like that embodied level of discernment and that trust, because I can be in a state where I can let that lead happen and hold myself through the uncomfortability. And that's, I think, what is that like jump step of we don't need to then come back to myself as an individual and be like, okay, like this is hurting my feelings and we need to process this together. But I can be in the state of openness, in the state of communion with the other and be like, this is what it is. And I surrender that container. And that really is when we get to have that divine union inside and outside. Yeah, there's really nothing like that.
I feel it's what life is teaching also, really, when it puts us in situations that we would not choose and that are uncomfortable, and when we can then at that point, surrender to it and really trust it. And okay, I don't know why and how, but I trust, and it's gonna take me where I have to go. That's how I um, see also how we're being taught in a way, or prepared maybe to also experience it on a more body to body level. But as you say, for most people it's first actually learning to assert their yes, their no, their boundaries, desires, discern all of that, and before they can even consider moving there without hurting themselves actually more, because it can be so, we might think, and I'm including myself, right, we might think we're ready and maybe then actually we're not, and then we're hurting ourselves actually more than we do good. But it's definitely something that I feel or intuit like really as a potential, as a vision maybe also, where we could actually move.
And it's like, you say life and I say life, I say God,
Yeah, that's it.
the source. And it's like, are we willing to submit to God's will? Our
Which is
actual,
ours,
it's our
at the
soulful,
same.
that is our most soulful vitality when we can
Yeah.
submit to that will of like following that innate deep desire that's like, I don't know where it's bringing me, I don't know how I ended up in this moment, but like, here I am, can I open to it fully and see what comes next?
And maybe really own also that God's will is deeply down deeply my will as well, my soul's
Our
will,
God.
right? It is what I just maybe not owned yet, like on a conscious level, but on some level. And let's before we wrap up, also talk about how, you know, we talked about how we consent to be born, and you talked about the souls, like before incarnation, they might be ready, they might not be ready, so they consent. How is it about moving out of this dimension, you know, being dying, or maybe even being killed or killing, if we talk about also in our relationships to animals, for example. We could also talk about it when it comes to humans, like there are these, you know, controversial discussions about people who are terminally ill, if we should be allowed to end their lives, etc. But like this whole topic of dying and even being like the instrument to help another being move dimension into the other direction, not just bringing them into life, but also taking them out. How do you feel about that topic also when it comes to consent? Do we consent
And
to being killed?
Yeah, and such a rich and so many nuance here. Like, I don't want to diminish this in any way, because we could talk about this for another 3 hours.
Yes.
And again, we have those three timelines. We have full consent, we have seated consent, and we have coerced consent. And someone can say, I'm going to kill you. And I can be like, oh no, and suddenly I just consent to it because I believe that they can. And I say, yes, like you can. Or someone can say, I'm going to kill you. And I can be like, fuck no. And like, that's that. And so even on these levels, yes, we're consenting. And I do believe, and from what I've seen, like, my teacher Catherine gives it as a great example. It's like acupressure points in our timeline, and there are these moments when we can leave, and they're kind of, maybe they're predestined, who knows, right? But there are these moments and we choose, like, those are choice points. I guess we can all relate to that sensation of, oh, this is a choice point. Like, if I choose this way, I'm going this way, and if I go that way, right? We have that with life and death as well. And it definitely is a choice. And even with, euthanasia, it can happen on those three. We could come into a soul to soul connection with this person, with this being, and be like, are you ready? And feel their whole soulful yes. But are we willing to follow that? We euthanized a dog a number of years ago, and it was such a great initiation. Like, it was so 100% clear that this is what we needed to do. And to meet death in that conscious way, and like, her soul was 100%, that's why I came to you. It was a very specific circumstance that I'm not going to go into now, but being able to release this life in a conscious way, and that beauty. I never experienced this specific soul, this dog, so peaceful, so radiant, so loving, as when we were on our way to the vet to euthanize. And I was like, oh my God, but what are we doing? We should keep her now. But it was that confirmation. And there's so many, I can have so many stories of people seeing others on the last day of their life, and the radiance that was there, even when it was a freak accident, even when there was a suicide, even when something happened, like, the radiance was there prior. And if we track to that, we know the rightness of it.
I can relate to it when it comes to also sacrificing animals. Like,
Yeah.
I am raising my own animals, and I can feel when the moment has come also. First of all, I believe, like, if they came to me specifically incarnating, they kind of consented also to the possibility, like, that this could happen. But it's really, they talk to you, and I feel the same is true for plants, for trees, for if we are kind of attuned to nature, then we can perceive when we are asked to take a certain action, whatever action that might be actually, but it might also be indeed helping them to change dimension. And do I then say yes to that as well?
Mm-hmm. Mm. Life, death, sex, babies, all of it.
Yeah, but that is, for me, that is fertility, and that is regeneration. It's decay and it's rebirth, and it's moving through the different seasons and cycles. And yeah, I would like to end. How can people connect with you? And if they're interested also to work more on the topic of consent or beyond consent, how they can find you and connect with you.
Yeah, best ways are head on over to my website, www.herreturn.com, and sign up for my email list. Invitations are there. Early next year, I'm going to take a bit of a break for a while, but when I come back mid next year, I'll definitely be teaching more group work, which is a great opportunity to get into the field. I'm also available for one-to-one. I have a pretty intense level of investment to really go on a deep journey. If you're ready, then I'd be happy to support you. And for next year, there's openings. And I'm also active intermittently on Instagram, which is it's her somatic dream. With periods between. So I'm sure, Claudia, you can put links where
Sure.
this is going.
Yeah. I'm gonna put everything underneath the video. And if you feel the yes on a deep level to connect with Lindsey, then trust it. And she will also tune into if she believes you.
Yes.
Because it's important to be a match and to be aligned. Otherwise, it's just not gonna take us to where we can go, at least like to our orgasmicness, which is something that Lindsey is also an expert in. So thank you very much for that very rich and interesting conversation. And yeah, if you enjoyed it, then I invite you to subscribe to the channel and of course to connect and to share. All of that is also part of fertility. And yeah, see you next time. Thank you. Thank you, Lindsey. Thank you, everybody, for listening.